to... Welcome back. We're at FreedoniaCon 2025, and we have the wonderful Miss Debbie again. She's going to talk about editing for Earthdawn. Debbie, correct me on this, but I think you've been the head editor for Earthdawn since 4th edition started, right?
Yes, I would say so. I actually have been editing off and on since about 2018.
So if that's not the start, it's darn close.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, you've been the head editor for Earthdawn the entire time I've been with the company. So if you are interested in writing for Earthdawn, this is the person you want to make friends with, because she knows all of the things, and you don't just edit for where's the comma, even though I swear they're decorative. You actually do content editing too.
Yes.
So,
I do try to do that. Yes.
So if you're ever interested in writing for Earthdawn, this is the lady you want to make friends with. And with that, Miss Debbie, I will let you have at it.
All right, thank you. Welcome, everyone. This is not going to be a very long PowerPoint, so if you have questions, be sure to stop me and ask them as we go through. So as Andy was mentioning, there are people that can look for the typographical errors and the grammatical errors, and that would be a proofreader. A proofreader, that's what they focus on, is making sure that it is grammatically correct. But as far as an editor goes, an editor is not going to only just check grammar and spelling, but also be interested in the storyline. In my case, I fit the new material in with the history of Earthdawn and make sure that it is compatible, or if it's something new, that it is acceptable to the FASA team. Why is editing important? Editing can enhance the clarity and coherence of writing. That's also one of the things that I try very hard to do, is to make it coherent to the audience, make it more understandable. I have a background in teaching college. I taught at a community college for 11 years. And so I like to start where people are and bring them up to where they should be on their understanding. And so that's what I like to do when I am editing. It also makes sure that your message is communicated clearly. That goes along with the clarity and coherence part. When writing for publication, you want the product to be professional. At FASA, we want our product to be as professional as possible so that it doesn't distract from the awesome content that we have in the books. If you're a writer and you're editing your own work, you have to think about it a little bit differently, because when you're writing, you're being creative. You are using a different part of your brain that is where the ideas come from. But when you're editing, you're trying to evaluate the work in front of you, not just come up with new ideas, but decide how it all fits together. And this is probably a little known fact, but editing could take twice as long as writing, depending on how many times it is gone through, because usually it's gone through at least 2 more times more than the writing is done. So you usually have an editing pass through on the writing, and then you will have a proofreading run through at the final stage to make sure that everything is grammatically correct.
I will throw in my 2 cents on that. Editing does take a lot longer. And I will say this, I think it's very hard to self-edit. The few times I've seen people try to self-edit, I think your mind knows what you meant it to say, so you miss things more. But that could just be my experience with self-editing. What do you think, Miss Debbie?
From what I've seen, that does seem to be the case, that writers don't usually like to edit their own work. Not only does it take a lot of time, but when you're the creator of something, you're going to see it like it was in your head. You're not necessarily going to catch what actually came out on the page. So that's why it's always good to have at least a second pair of eyes to look at it and make sure that what was in your head as a writer is on the page after you're done writing. So even writers that do go through and edit their own work, it's usually best to have another pair of eyes to look at it as well. So to be an editor, these are some of the skills that are helpful. Attention to detail, especially for the grammatical and typographical errors. You want to be able to absorb all of the words that you are seeing as well as the punctuation. Critical thinking, you're going to take two or more things and put them together in a new way. So you use critical thinking to help to shape the storyline or to notice if there is some inconsistency in the storyline or something missing. Being creative is also helpful, especially if you're helping the writer with
ideas.
Yeah, with ideas or shaping the story, or mostly this part is going to go with communication. Because as you're editing and you're reading through what the writer has written, you may have questions. And if you have questions as the editor, you know the audience is going to have questions. So most of the time, editors will make suggestions to the writer. They're not there to fix what the writer wrote, except for the grammatical and typographical errors. But as far as the storyline, it's more or less to make suggestions about what the writer could think about to make it a better work of art.
Can I
So
say something
communicating
again?
is more, sure.
So we're always looking for writers. I'm always behind on trying to find writers. But I don't know if people realize that they could offer to help with editing. I know we don't really pay.
Yeah.
We're poor. But everybody already knows that part. But one of the things is when you get to work with the lovely Miss Debbie. Two, it's early access to books. And I think that this, what you're talking about right now, is one of the most important things to somebody if they wanted to help with editing, is that you have a hand in how things actually go.
Yeah.
You can make suggestions that could really change and guide some of the lore. So I was just going to say, if people were interested in helping edit, you can always message me and I will put you in touch with Miss Debbie. But one of the big perks, I think, is the fact that you get to have some hand in making suggestions.
That's right.
And
I
Miss
have
Debbie's awesome.
been able to, yeah, I've been able to add some of my ideas in, and writers have been open to those ideas and have incorporated them into their work, and it's very fulfilling. So to go back to the editing skills, communication is mostly communicating with the writer. As I said before, the editor is not just going to fix whatever it was that was written. They're going to work with the writer to make it the best piece of writing that they can with the writer's participation. The technical knowledge is going into basically understanding the language and the grammar and the punctuation, but also knowing your subject. In the case of Earthdawn, I have a lot of knowledge about Earthdawn and a lot of past knowledge from previous books that have been written. And so I can tell as I'm reading whether it goes with the lore and the canon that has previously, been established. And so that helps me to make sure the new works are in line with the older works as well.
Miss Debbie?
So as I alluded to, yes.
I'm sorry. If you offered to help with editing, we don't expect anybody to know all the lore, right?
That is correct. Yes, a person could start out as a proofreader, in which they are basically getting their feet wet with the grammatical errors and the typographical errors, making sure everything is up to par that way. And then as they are reading the new material, they can start to basically think back to what they know about Earthdawn and decide whether it fits or not, and then make suggestions based on that.
And they can ask questions, and you would be happy to help, and everybody on the team would be happy to help as well.
Yes, I've asked questions on the team, and for example, a certain book, whether it was canon or not, and uh, if it's not canon, then obviously changes can be introduced. If it is canon, then you want to be careful introducing changes. So yeah, I don't know or remember everything to do with Earthdawn, but if you have some knowledge of Earthdawn, then you could be an editor of Earthdawn. So sometimes the writer is a little bit wary of the editor because they're afraid that there are going to be changes made. But the good editor is going to offer options and not commandments to the writer of what they have to do. And depending on the relationship with the writer, the editor may rework some of the writing in order to make a transition or whatever the writer might desire for the editor to do. But the editor is not there to be the writer. They're there to be the eyes that are going to help the writer see their own work in a new way. The editor also stands in as the audience so that whatever reaction the editor has is likely the same as the reaction of the audience. That is an important part of it. So if somebody is new to editing, for example, Earthdawn, then you can think of it as, you know, how would somebody who's reading this for the first time, how would they react to it? What would they get out of it? What else do they need to get out of it? And to keep in mind that editors make mistakes too, and that's why it's best to think of it as suggestions or options so that the writer can make the final decision about their writing. If you're an editor, there are some guidelines that you want to keep in mind as you're going through there. And because you're not the writer, you have certain obligations of what you're trying to do to help the writer. So the first thing is if it isn't broke, don't fix it. So you don't want to change what the writer has written. You don't want to change their voice, which is their unique style of writing, or the meaning if they're trying to get a meaning through the writing to their audience. You don't want to change that either. But you do want to help make it clear and easier for the audience to understand. So you're going to be constantly thinking as you're reading through the work, you're going to be asking questions of yourself and of the writer. And we usually do this in the way of comments, and we add comments to the writing itself, to the document. And this will, when the writer goes through, the writer can go back through and look at the comments and see what the editor is pointing out. It's also important not to introduce new errors into the writing. So to be absolutely sure of your corrections that you're making, I am pretty good at just knowing the correction that needs to be made, but I still go to Merriam-Webster dictionary or other places to find out, to make sure to double check myself before making a change. Uh, so there's nothing wrong with going to sources that can help you to get it right. And finally, you want to experience joy in the writer's success. So what you're doing is very helpful to the writer, and when the writer succeeds, the editor succeeds as well. So maybe some common misconceptions about editors. So a lot of people think proofreaders or editors are just proofreaders in which they correct grammar and fix punctuation. As I've already explained, they usually are involved with the storyline and or past works and making them fit with the canon. Editors just take words out. This is not the case. Sometimes we do want to keep things short and sweet in Earthdawn books. We want to save the audience time when they're trying to find something or learn something from the books that we write. And so we want to make sure that it's clear and concise. So we don't usually take a lot of words out, but we will reword something in a shorter form. And another thing is if the writer is repetitious, a little repetitious in their writing, and they tend to use the same phrase or the same words, descriptive words, adverbs, adjectives, over and over, the same ones, then I usually look for synonyms. Something that either is going to convey it in a slightly different way from the context, or just to use a different word just to make it more interesting. So we don't always just take words out, but we will try to make it interesting and concise. The editors focus only on the writing. As I've said before, we also look at past works and make sure that it fits in with the theme of whatever the book is about. And editing is a thankless task. I feel like I am praised by the team often.
Because you're awesome. But our thank yous are not as awesome as you deserve.
Well, I thank you. I appreciate that. That's very kind of you. But there is a lot of support, at least on the Earthdawn team, for editing. They are very grateful and they ask very nicely if I can get to something. And then Andy, of course, will determine what is the priority order that needs to be edited. And that is the order that I will then choose the works to edit. Anybody have any other misconceptions about editors or just ideas about editors that they'd like to share? Okay. Now to look more specifically at Earthdawn, this is some of the style guide. This isn't the complete style guide, but it is a partial style guide, just some of the things I thought might be interesting for this talk that writers can follow. We have a complete style guide that's available for writers to Earthdawn. We use American English. We use an active voice. Active voice is when the subject of the sentence does the action or the verb of the sentence. So you would say, Usoon ate the eye-open, which would be the subject would be Usoon, the verb would be ate, and so it's direct, and that's called active voice. Passive voice would be the eye-open was eaten by Usoon. So that kind of reverses the order of the active voice and makes it passive voice. You want to avoid superfluous words. Again, we don't just take words out, but we try to reword the sentence so that it is going to be the most concise and most understandable possible. We use Oxford commas.
Yes, we do.
If you don't know what an Oxford comma is, it is if you have a list and you have something, comma, something, and something else, and then you have and right before the last thing, you're also going to have a comma before the on the word before the and. So that's what an Oxford comma is.
So one
So we
comma,
are
2 comma, and 3.
correct.
I'm big on Oxford commas.
Now, in American English, it's perfectly fine to leave that comma out on the second to last word.
No, it's not.
But for consistency, our style guide for Earthdawn is to use those Oxford commas. Now, when you have quotes, you want to put commas and periods inside the quotation marks. Again, this is can go either way, but this is just to keep it consistent for Earthdawn. And you're going to add an apostrophe S for possessive of words ending in S. So this is very controversial amongst editors, whether to add the S or not to add the S to a word that ends in S. But it's the way we pronounce it. We make that S sound twice when we say it, like Harris's. I would not, if I was talking about the singular, I would say Harris. If I'm talking about the Harris owns something, I would say the Harris's house, for example. So that's what we're going to do with our style guide for Earthdawn. And for those of you that are writers, if you do this before I see it, then it makes my job a lot easier, and also makes it quicker for me to go through your writing and to make the suggestions and grammatical corrections that are needed to make it a very professional work.
I have 2 comments.
Certainly.
So on the commas and periods go inside quotation mark. Pretty much all punctuation goes inside quotation marks, with some very, very strange and rare exceptions. If you're doing editing, the European writers are especially they're taught a different style, so they have to be watched for that.
Yes, exactly.
And actually, our Chicago people are taught a different style and have to be watched for that one in specific. The other one that
there is a Chicago style of writing. You're right.
Yeah, took me forever to figure out what that was, but yes, that's what. So they're taught differently, so you have to make sure if you know that it's one of those writers that you keep your eye out for that. It's a pet peeve of mine. If the sentence, because you can have a grammatically correct sentence, but if it goes on for 3-4 lines, it tends to be convoluted for most readers. So I really hate when they take it and they make a sentence a paragraph, because readability is very important. We want people to understand what we wrote.
Right. And as the editor, you would make that suggestion or correction, and because you're standing in for the audience, so you're going to make it as clear and concise as possible.
And sometimes that's pretty easy. It's just breaking it up into into 2 or 3 pieces.
I will say, though, that I don't criticize writers who do have a sentence that's a whole paragraph.
I don't know if it's a criticism versus a suggestion.
Exactly. It's if that's how they learn to write, then that's how they learn to write. And it's my job as the editor to make sure that it is fitting the style guide for Earthdawn and the conciseness and clarity that we need for a product that's going to be published for an audience.
See, I told you she's good. But yes, I think it's really important that our editors and our writers can go back and forth in a positive way. And Miss Debbie's always great about that.
Yeah, that did take a while for me to get into when I first started, before you were involved, Andy. Is I was kept very separate from the writer, and it just kind of went back into the unknown as far as I could tell. But I do like that I have more connection with the writers now, and I feel like it's more of a collaboration rather than just sending it off,
I'm
to
glad
be
that
looked
I've
at.
done something useful. Look at me. I get it. I get my bonus cookie for today too. But I think that you have such a great attitude, and I would love to see some other writers that have such a great attitude to help you out. But I will let you go on.
Okay. I think you mean editors, right? Some additional
Yes.
editors?
I would love to see some
Yes.
more editors to work with you. And I think
Yeah,
that I've
a
tried
big
to
way.
foster a good relationship between our editors and our writers.
Yes, yes. And I feel like we have a very good stable of writers already and can always use more.
Yes. So many more. As soon as we get done with FreedoniaCon, it's back to I need help working over some of the people who've already submitted because we need to
Yeah.
bring in yet more writers.
And I have a list of things that need to be edited, so I could certainly use some more help as well. So even more specific style for Earthdawn is we have difficulty numbers, which is the target number for a test. And so to make it concise, we have the name of the skill or the talent, and then the number, which is the target, the difficulty number, which is the target number, in this case, a 10, and then the word test. And so you're going to see this sentence over and over and over, especially in adventures where they're talking about, letting the GM know that this is the type of test and this is the target number. So it's not only concise, but it's also easy for the GM to follow and know exactly what it is that they're doing within the game, especially when the players are throwing all kinds of you know what in the game. So capitalization is a very specific thing. You may not realize this. We use all the standard capitalization for like titles and things like that. But there are certain specific words in Earthdawn that we capitalize or don't capitalize. So, for example, when you're talking about the discipline, you're going to capitalize both the word discipline and the discipline that you're looking at, like discipline warrior or warrior discipline. Physical armor, mystic defense, these are both types of stats that are on the character sheet. Karma is capitalized. That is what we use to enhance our abilities. Step, and then usually followed by a number. Step 7, for example. Excuse me. Step would be capitalized. That is how we determine the number of dice that we roll. Name giver is what we use instead of people or races. We use the term name giver, and that is always capitalized. Names are very important in Earthdawn, and so the word name is usually capitalized in a lot of cases. Passion are the deities of Earthdawn, so their name and also the word passion itself are capitalized. True fire, which is an example of an element. We have ordinary fire, which is just like a campfire, something like that. But true fire is a very precise elemental type of substance that is used for enchanting and for getting other certain types of things done. So the true part is capitalized as emphasizing that it is a significant type of element. And then the actual element name is still not capitalized. Horrors are the big bad guys in Earthdawn, and they are a very big deal in Earthdawn. So the word horror is always capitalized. Different Earthdawn names that we don't capitalize, adept, which is basically anybody who studies and is has raised their powers in circles. Circles are the advancements within their discipline. Citadel is an alternate to a care. A care, as you could see further down the sentence, is the underground places where people live during the scourge. I don't have it on there, but the scourge is always capitalized. The scourge word, not the. Great dragon, when you're talking about just a general great dragon, you would have it not capitalized. If you were talking about Or if you're talking about the species or something, then it would be not capitalized. Questers are basically followers of different passions, and they are not capitalized. The various name giver races, such as Tiskrang, is not capitalized unless it is the language of Tiskrang. They don't have another name for their language, it's just called the Tiskrang language. So it would be capitalized if you were talking about the language. If you're referring to the game master in one of the Earthdawn books, you would leave the name lowercase. And if you're talking about a creature, Krogen is one of the creatures of Earthdawn. And again, it would be not capitalized. Any questions about capitalization? You kind of get used to it as you go through it. It seems like you don't have to like memorize what all these capitalizations are or not, but just an example. Did you start to say something?
I was going to say this is really useful because I don't always remember what's supposed to be and what's not supposed to be capitalized. So I'm so glad you have this all together.
Yeah, I found the document actually that I had on this writing style for Earthdawn, and so I want to make sure that the writers all have access to this because it would be very helpful if they already know this and they're already doing this. It makes it much easier to edit it later. But if they miss it now and then, or if they miss one, it's no problem for me to go through and find it. If I have to edit something all the way through and there's no errors, then I feel like I haven't done what I'm supposed to be doing, just to be honest. We italicize very few things in Earthdawn books. We do italicize the names of vessels and the words that are in one of the game languages. So I mentioned there's a Tiskrang language. There's also an Obsidian language and an Orc language and so on. So whenever you have a foreign word other than English, you're going to put it in italics as well. And so I have an example of a vessel name, the TriStar, and Refsalonica, which is basically taking water and making it into a barrier. This is one of the words in the Tiskrang language. Oops, looks like I didn't put the question page on here. So does anybody have any questions about editing or editing for Earthdawn?
Well, I know that if you're interested, you should reach out to me at Andy@FASAGames.com. And I will help put you in touch with Miss Debbie. Maybe put editing in the thing, the line. I learned a lot though. Because I don't always remember which things, especially on the capitalized and not. I know that the punctuation outside of quotations drives me crazy, but I don't always get the capitalization part correct. So that's really cool. Do you enjoy?
Yeah, it's always good to have a reminder. We all have our little things that are difficult for us. I have mine that are difficult for me, and I always have to go back and check and make sure that I've got that part right. But capitalization, I'm pretty good at just off the cuff.
Do you enjoy being an editor?
I do. I do. I like reading the new works. I like adding my part to it. I really like revisiting the old material. Like I will go into my old source books if I'm checking on something to make sure that it's matching one of the older source books. Yeah, I really like it.
I also know that you GM Earthdawn.
Yes.
So it's really fantastic to see your level of knowledge, both at the table and not at the table.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely has enhanced my game as well to um, be able to see and read every single book. Well,
I
not
don't
every
think I can
single
even
one,
say
but
that.
all the ones.
I was going to say, I don't think I've read every single book. I have not read Magic Deep or Secrets yet.
Yeah,
It's so big.
yeah. That one's
So
not one you would just read through either. It's more of a reference
yeah.
book. But yeah, that's the thing about editing is you will read just about every word.
So I have a kind of maybe a question. So you're talking about,
Okay.
and I know that. So Earthdawn books tend to be, I think, a little more verbose, a little more poetical, especially when we're doing lore. And it's a question
Yes.
that Morgan and I used to go back and forth about. How much is too
Mm-hmm.
much when you're trying to go for, we want it concise, but we don't want to lose that charm, if that makes sense?
Uh-huh.
How do you, as an editor, decide? Because, like I said, Morgan and I used to go back and forth sometimes.
Yeah.
So, how do you decide where that line is for you?
Oh, it's super easy. The quotes, there are quotes in almost every chapter of somebody from the environment, like the
Yeah,
librarians that
at
are
the chapter
reporting on
heads.
these various stories. Anything that there is a quote like that, I pretty much leave as is because that is the style, that is the flair, that is the immersive quality of getting into the world of Earth Dawn are those quotes. So I will definitely read it, and they're very enjoyable to me to read. But I will not make any. I will not shorten it. I will not change the wording. If they repeat the same adjective 5 times, I'll leave it in there because that's just the way they talk. But the actual text of the book, I usually I will get more into being concise because that's where the audience is going to want to be able to find what they want quickly and be able to use it in their game quickly.
What has been your favorite book so far that you've helped edit?
Hmm.
I'm going to read you a quote while you think about it. Mr. Pink has written, sorry
Elven Nate.
listening, but working in the kitchen as well. One thing I love about the Edie source books, the quotes are not always from a reliable narrator. I love that too. I actually love when our quotes kind of argue with each other. I like that they cast shade on stuff. Sorry. Which one's been your
Mm-hmm,
favorite
mm-hmm.
book so far?
Elven Nations.
I like that one too.
That's a good book.
Kyle, Michael,
And
and
it introduced
Carl
a
did
whole
a
new realm of elves
fantastic
that I
job.
didn't even know existed.
Sorry. What was that?
I said it introduced a whole new realm of elves I didn't even know existed.
And did you know that they actually did it? Like, they didn't even totally make that up. There were other that were very briefly mentioned, but they expanded upon it a
But
lot.
I figured there are probably some small references,
Very small.
but
I looked up most of
it was,
those. Very, very small.
yeah, yeah,
It's like a line in a
yeah.
book from first ed.
So I was just being a fangirl reading that book.
I think that the guys did such a great job. Like, it was just an
Yep.
amazing book, and they did such a great job with it. I was so happy.
Mm-hmm.
I'll I think it's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
So, um, let's see. We have you for a little bit longer. Do you want another question?
Sure.
So, I know we can't give out all of our secrets on what all we're working on, but I
Uh-huh.
do know that we're working very hard on a project that we are referring to as Hinterlands. And I know that you've been doing
Yeah.
a lot with that with Alan Farr, who's done a lot of writing for us. What do you think
Yes.
of it so far? What's your opinion as an editor?
I think it's going to make a lot of GMs happy.
As a
It's
GM?
one of those, yes. Definitely, I really like this series as a GM. It seems like it's a well thought out world, uh, location, and the adventures are interesting. They're a little bit different than some of the other adventures we've had with Earthdawn. So I think that it's going to appeal to people, and especially to GMs to use for their home campaigns.
Me too, but I really appreciate having. And so, as both an editor and a GM, you're happy.
Yes.
I love
Yeah, there's not
Alan.
been a whole lot of editing to do. Alan is an extremely good writer, and I enjoy reading his work.
Did you get to edit some of Alan's other books, like Iopos and Travar?
I did. I was not as involved with Travar, but I was more with the Iopos book.
There's some really fun, creepy stuff in Iopos.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he seems to be really good at the bad guy part.
All right. I think unless there's other questions, we can let you run away and hide.
Until I have to have the next editing project.
Well, I will say this: I need to contact Alan, and I've been so busy. I appreciate you so much. I rely on you more than you realize. You're fabulous. I'm glad that you're enjoying spending more time with the team.
Yep, I sure am.
All right. I'm going to let you run away. I'm stopping the recording. Bye, Miss Debbie.
Bye.